Library System welcomes you to our monthly series from the Nevada Historical Society, presents High Noon with Neil Cobb. This afternoon's topic is about a marvelous feat, celebrating the 150th anniversary of the completion of the Virginia and Gold Hill watering system, presented by Sherry Griffin Grundy. My name is Samantha, and I'm so happy to be here with you today. And now I would like to introduce Sherry Hayes Zorn with the Nevada Historical Society. Again, welcome and thank you.
Thank you, Samantha, and thank you with the Washoe County Library System always for helping us be able to make these programs available by Zoom and recording them so you can watch these great programs at any time. And in case you don't know, this year the Historical Society is turning 120 years old, and we have had a long history in helping preserve Nevada's history, and I hope you will be able to come to different programs and events that we've scheduled out throughout the year. Please visit our website if you want to learn more about our upcoming programs. But let me introduce our host for today. Neil Cobb has been such a longtime supporter here with the Nevada Historical Society since 1988 and has been a wonderful spokesperson going out to the community and giving talks and promoting what we do to help preserve the state's history. So as our honorary curator, let me introduce Neil Cobb. Hey, Neil.
Thanks, Sherry. Always appreciate the intro. Our speaker today, Sherry Griffin Grundy, is a resource development consultant, archivist, and the owner of Griffin Development Services, LLC, in Carson City, Nevada. Sherry began providing services to the museum in May of 2012. With over 20 years of experience in nonprofit management, fundraising, and collection management. Sherry supports the museum in various ways. Sherry has a degree in American history and was a certified fundraising executive for 9 years. Sherry lives in Carson City with her husband, Tom, and is actively involved in the community as a volunteer and local professional providing resource development services to the area of nonprofits. So at this time, please welcome Sherry Grundy.
Hi, Neil. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sherry, too. We really appreciate the invitation to present our exhibit that the Fourth Ward School is hosting in Virginia City and celebrate the marvelous feat, which was the creation of the water system that provides water to the Comstock. So before we begin the presentation on the development of the water system, I wanted to share a bit about the historic Fourth Ward School museum in Virginia City and our Changing Gallery exhibit, A Marvelous Feat. Our school building was constructed over 5 months between July and November 1876. The design of the school was developed by architect C.M. Bennett in a Second Empire architectural style with a mansard roof and bell tower. The school building has 4 stories, which provided 16 classrooms for up to 1,000 students. It was state-of-the-art for the time with sinks and water fountains, indoor bathroom, good heating, and good ventilation. The school building was dedicated and opened to the public on November 28, 1876, and celebrated as a centennial gift to the state of Nevada and noted as the pride of Virginia. The Fourth Ward School opened for classes in January 1877. The first 2 graduates of the Fourth Ward were 2 young ladies, Anna Herbelin and Mary O'Farrell, in June of 1878. We know of 433 students who graduated from the school. The last class to graduate included 7 students in June of 1936. For the next 50 years, the Fourth Ward School building was vacant. Over the years, the community expressed their wishes to keep the building, and various repairs and fundraising efforts were conducted. In 1947, ownership of the building transferred from the school district to Story County, and the county continues to own the building today. Over those decades, while it was vacant, the building ended up storing a lot of items from the county and the school district, as well as bats and pigeons taking up residence on the 4th floor. But certainly the former school building must have been a reminder to residents and visitors as they drove by of the rich history that was the Comstock. And there continues to be a strong commitment on the part of the community and the alumni of the 4th Ward School to preserve the building and make it a museum. So in the 1980s, restoration and fundraising efforts were conducted with funding from the state of Nevada and Story County grants, along with community contributions. In 1986, the school building opened with a museum on the 1st floor under the operations of Story County. The first exhibit was the historic classroom, which we still have today. In May 2000, a nonprofit organization was formed, the Historic 4th Ward School Foundation, which continues to operate the museum today. In 2012, our Archive and Research Center was opened, which houses our permanent collection of over 10,000 items. Those interested in conducting research or interested in possibly donating school or Comstock history-related items can contact me to schedule an appointment, and at the end of the presentation, I'll have my contact information. The mission of the foundation is to connect people to the relevance and importance of the Comstock story through its authentic preservation, interactive exhibits, interpretive programs, and our archival resources. Today, the museum offers 5 permanent exhibit rooms. We have some pictures of those here, as well as our alumni room. And the other exhibit that we have is our changing gallery, which offers a special topic for 1 to 2 years. And today I'm going to share with you a portion of our current exhibit in the changing gallery, A Marvelous Feat. You will also see our hours here on the slide for 2024, so we hope you can come and visit us this year. Our current changing gallery exhibit, which opened in April 2023, is A Marvelous Feat, which celebrates the 150th anniversary of the completion of the Virginia and Gold Hill Water Company's water system in 1873. The exhibit will continue through December 2024. The first half of the exhibit focuses on the water conditions on the Comstock in the 1860s and early 1870s. The formation of the Virginia and Gold Hill Water Company in 1863, and the design and development of the water system that brought water from the Sierra Nevada mountains to the Comstock in 1873. The second half of the exhibit shares information on the continued operation of the company and the water system, the caretakers who ran the system, the eventual sale of the system in various stages, and how the water system operates today. Of course, there are also various objects on display in the exhibit, such as a section of the number 1 iron pipe, items from the water master's residence, which is better known as Lakeview House, company office furniture and equipment, tools, a workbench from the Divide Reservoir, water company books, and personal effects of the last 2 superintendents. The exhibit covers a large amount of information. So today I'll be sharing the first half of the exhibit with you, which focuses on the development of the company and the completion of the system in 1873. We invite you to visit the museum this year to see the full exhibit, see all the objects and the photographs, and read more of the interesting stories that we've included in the exhibit. I also wanted to share a little background on the development of the exhibit with you. In early 2022, one of our members, James, or better known Jim Leonard, reminded us that the 150th anniversary of the water system was coming up in 2023. Jim had a very good reason for keeping this important anniversary in mind. Both his grandfather, James M. Leonard, and his father, Hobart Leonard, served as superintendents for the company over 70 years, between 1905 and 1974. The Leonard family was also the donors who selected the 4th Ward School Museum and Archive to receive a collection of over 700 water company historical photographs, records, and objects after their father, Hobart Leonard, passed away. Sadly, Jim Leonard passed away in February 2023, just a couple months before our exhibit opened. We were honored to dedicate our exhibit, A Marvelous Feat, in Jim's memory, with a special ceremony on the opening of the exhibit in April 2023. As some of you know, there have been published resources that share the history of the development of the water system. Reviewing these previous works was important to the preparation of the exhibit. On the slide, I have listed some of these key resources. Certainly, the resources closer to the time of the actual development of the company and the water system are very important. The period newspapers, though, are really the first telling of that history and what was being reported at the time. The research would prove to be very interesting, sometimes confusing and humorous, but fascinating and insightful throughout the process. Reviewing our own resources from the Leonard collection was equally important, but we also wanted to know what other history was available in area repositories. Time was spent reviewing water company collections at the Nevada Historical Society in Reno and the Nevada State Library and Archive in Carson City. This research was fascinating, and there were great finds. Not only did these collection items bring up some new information, but also some new questions that can be researched in the future. The reality of the water company and the water system is that the records are extensive. Knowing that we at the museum only had 14 panels in the changing gallery and 2 side walls, we knew we couldn't cover it all. So it was tough making those decisions of what got included and what we had to leave for another time. Of course, the other key component to the development of the exhibit was reaching out to the current operators of the water system. It was a pleasure to meet and work with the staff at the State of Nevada Marlette Water System at the Lakeview office, with the Story County Public Works Director, with the Carson City Public Works Water Utility Manager, and staff at the Nevada State Parks. Not only did they recognize the importance of our planned 150th anniversary exhibit, but also generously shared information as well as objects that were important to the system for us to share in the exhibit. Combined, all of the reading, research, collection of items, and discussions were essential to the development of our exhibit. We were able to delve a little bit deeper into the history of the water issues that the Comstock was facing, why the need from the water from the Sierra Nevadas was so important, to learn about the individuals who developed the system, and to understand why it was such an engineering marvel at the time that it was designed and built. We learned about the caretakers and their families who ran the system. We learned about the leadership of the company and their commitment, and how the system continues to provide high quality, essential water to the Comstock and surrounding areas. So I hope as we get into the details of the history that all of you will find something interesting. For those of you that are new to the history, for those that know some of the history, and for those that are even engineers or historians who have studied the system and the history. I hope you each will find something new from our presentation today. After the discovery of what became known as the Comstock Lode in 1859, word spread and men quickly came to the area that would become Virginia City and Gold Hill, seeking their own fortunes. The population grew rapidly, with over 3,000 residents and 1,100 dwellings at the time of the 1860 census. A year later, the population had grown to 4,500 residents, and 10 years later, at the time of the 1870 census, Story County reported just over 11,000 residents, and the growth would continue. As the communities developed during the 1860s, with more people, businesses, and an expanding number of mines and mills, the natural environment was being strained to meet the growth. In particular, access to water for both human consumption and for use in mining would become a challenge. Naturally flowing fresh water from creeks, streams, and mountain springs was present, but was limited. And during the dry months or dry years, there was even less. But the demand for quality drinking water continued to grow, as did the need for the consistent supply of water for mining operations. The situation created a competitive market as companies such as the Virginia City Water Works and the Gold Hill Water Works and others rushed to find new water sources. They would lease access to limited supply and defend the sources that they had, as seen in this newspaper article that we've included, war declared. While the companies developed small reservoirs, cisterns, wooden flumes, and pipes to store and deliver the locally available water to the residents in the mining interest, when the water was running low during the dry months, the need for more water became a very primary concern. On May 12, 1863, the Virginia and Gold Hill Water Company was incorporated in the Nevada Territory with the purpose of supplying water to the communities of Virginia City and Gold Hill in Story County. Capital stock was $250,000 divided into 1,000 shares. You see here a copy of the incorporation document, which is held at the Nevada State Library and Archive in Carson City, with the May 12, 1863 date. This incorporation date in 1863 is different from what you will find in most histories written about the company. The date of May 12, 1862 is the one you will likely find referenced. This date of 1863 became apparent while doing research on the water company at the Nevada Historical Society. Within their collection is a roughly 6 by 9 inch bound book, safely preserved in a smaller archival box. The box contained handwritten minutes of the Virginia and Gold Hill Water Company. Page 1 records the incorporation of the newly formed water company as May 12, 1863, not 1862. The book appears to have been possibly burnt in a fire, as its bound cover looks charred and is flaking off. But it was a great item to find and to have in that collection. So I wondered, where did the 1862 date come from, since there was so many references to that? It appears it came from Elliott Lord's book in 1883, Comstock Mining and Miners. Thankfully, Lord included a source for his 1862 incorporation date, which was an article in the Gold Hill News from March of 1865. The article under the heading, Where We Get Our Water, stated the May 12, 1862 date as the date of incorporation. So it appears that that 1865 article had an error. The article also stated that the new company was a consolidation of the Virginia Water Company and the Gold Hill Water Company. Again, something that you'll find written in the various histories. But the minute book stated that the consolidation was actually between the Virginia Water Company and the Anna Maria Ditch Company. There was no mention of the Gold Hill Company or the Gold Hill Water Company. So who was the Anna Maria Ditch Company? I was able to find a reference to the Ditch Company on a tax bill for the year ending March 1863, which listed Anna Marie Ditch Company and Gold Hill Water Works. So the two entities must have been closely aligned or one in the same. So two very interesting and insightful finds during our research. I also wanted to take a minute to acknowledge the initial company trustees from 1863. They are noted on that first bullet point there. N.H. Mason, who was Nathaniel Hockett Allen, was better known as Hawk Mason, and who was originally from Tennessee, and who Mason Valley is named after in Lyon County. He was considered one of the first settlers in the late 1850s. It was Mason who actually signed the tax bill for the Anna Maria Ditch Company back in 1863. So he appears to have been involved with the early water company before this consolidation. There was J.W. Gashwiller, who was John Watts Gashwiller, and he was better known as Gash. He served as the superintendent of the newly created water company for a few years. Gash was originally from Missouri and arrived in California in 1849. Was a California miner for a number of years and then came to the Comstock in the early mining rush. John Skay was associated with the operation of the original Virginia City Water Works in 1862 and possibly earlier. Unfortunately, we could not find very much information at all about C.G. Funk. He was Charles Funk. Richard Rising, originally from Pennsylvania, he was on the Comstock early, 1861, and was a prominent lawyer in Story County with the firm of Stewart, Baldwin, and Rising. He would become a district judge in 1874 and continue being elected for several terms. But returning to the development of the water company and the water issues, during the 1860s, much of the water came from various mining tunnels cut into the mountainsides, with primary source being the Santa Rita Tunnel, located north of Virginia City in Spanish Ravine. Newspapers regularly highlighted new water sources and upgrades to the delivery of the infrastructure. They also reported on the poor quality of the water, especially when the water company began pumping excess water from the mine shafts to supplement the water supply. The largest source of fresh water in the region was the Sierra Nevada mountains. In 1864, the company had been advised by civil engineer S.M. Buck, whose name was Silas Montgomery Buck, that while water from the Sierra was abundant, the cost of constructing a water system to deliver it would be very expensive. If the project could even be done, given the intense hydraulic pressure the water pipes would encounter in crossing Washoe Valley, given the significant elevation drop. The engineer Buck summed it up well in his letter by saying, as shown on the screen here, anyone at all acquainted with hydraulic pressure can at once see that to bring water across Washoe Valley at a sufficient height to make it available to supply Virginia City would, to say the least, be one of the most arduous undertakings of engineering and mechanical skill in modern times. Going on to say, it is an undertaking that no prudent capitalist would ever invest his money. I hardly need observe that without capital, and that in great abundance, this undertaking could never be accomplished. I'd like to note that Silas Buck was originally from Maine, and he came to California in 1856 and was practicing law in California at least by 1861. He would go on to become a very prominent and highly respected lawyer in Northern California, and specifically in Humboldt County. He appears to have completed some engineering surveying for the Central Pacific Railroad and some engineering projects in the Sacramento Valley, but his prominence was really as a lawyer. The water issues continued, though, for those living on and mining on the Comstock. There would be periods of sufficient water and then significant shortfalls, with these varying conditions reported in the local newspaper on a regular basis. Newfound water sources would be reported on, but other articles noted the challenges as well. I've included a couple of those articles on the slide, one highlighting the bad water conditions and one entitled Dry, about how some thought whiskey was actually more plentiful than water. A consistent flow of water was needed for the residents, but of key importance was the water needed by the mills and the hoisting works of the mines, which in 1865 were reported to number 45. A June 1871 Gold Hill newspaper article reported that some of the mills in Gold Canyon had to, quote, suspend operations because they could not get water enough to run with. And the scarcity of water caused some families to skirmish about considerably in order to find the necessary water to cook with or drink. So shortfalls in supplies during the summer and the dry months certainly appear to have presented challenges. While the company's water supply varied, the business enterprise of supplying water to the community in the mills was reported as profitable. In an April 1866 New York Times article, it reported the financial position of the water company. After 3 years of operation, receipts totaled just over $336,000. Disbursements was $163,000 for a net profit of $173,000. They had also paid out dividends of $166,000, leaving roughly about $7,000 for cash on hand. The $173,000 profit in 1866 would be worth about $3.4 million today. Maintaining access to the water that was flowing became even more contentious in 1867, when the water company's water source from the Santa Rita Tunnel ceased flowing. The coal company had been mining in the Cedar Hill area and opened a cut that redirected the Santa Rita water to the coal tunnel. The water company no longer had any water from this primary tunnel source. They filed an injunction with the court to stop the coal company, but lost and ended up working out a lease for the water from the coal company. When the lease was coming up for renewal in 1870, the coal company decided they didn't want to renew the lease anymore with the water company. They were going to keep the water for themselves with plans to deliver it to the community. The water company apparently saw this coming and had already started digging another tunnel, the Nevada Tunnel, just below the coal tunnel. So when it would open, it would divert the water from the coal tunnel back to the water company. I call this a great Nevada water story. A lengthy legal fight developed, though, and ultimately the water company lost that water source by court order in early 1871. You can find numerous articles about this struggle and the legal fight in the period newspapers and in Elliott Lord's book, Comstock Mining and Miners. About this same time, in the mid to late 1860s, the leadership of the Virginia and Gold Hill Water Company would begin to change as more influential and wealthy leaders on the Comstock became trustees and shareholders. William Sharon appears to have been in the company leadership between 1864 and 1869. Sharon was the local manager or agent of the Bank of California, which had begun to secure a financial hold or monopoly on many of the mines on the Comstock. He was also a director of the newly incorporated Virginia and Truckee Railroad. By December 1869, Walter Scott Hobart, James G. Fair, and John W. Mackey had become trustees. By 1871, the water company was under new leadership of Walter Scott Hobart, Walter Dean, John Skay, John Mackey, James Fair, James Flood, and William O'Brien. Walter Scott Hobart, pictured here at the top, was involved in mining, was a lumberman, an investor, and property owner, who, along with Seneca Marlette, provided lumber for the Comstock mines and would in time incorporate the Sierra Nevada Wood and Lumber Company. Both Walter Dean and John Skay were businessmen and investors. Mackey, Fair, Flood, and O'Brien, also pictured here, were of the mining interest and would soon be known as the Bonanza Kings or Silver Kings for their successful mining and business enterprises on the Comstock and resulting wealth. It should be noted that in April 1872, a Virginia and Gold Hill Water Company was incorporated in California with trustees Hobart, Skay, Fair, Flood, and 3 others to carry out water operations, purchase land, sell water, etc., in Story County and Lyon County in Nevada. An understanding of how these two entities, the Nevada and the California corporations, interacted is not entirely clear and could certainly benefit from additional research. As mining efforts continued to expand and the population continued to grow, More water had to be secured. The new company leadership had to return to the possibility of securing water from the Sierra Nevada mountains. In 1871, they reached out to the lead engineer of the Spring Valley Water Works in San Francisco, Herman Schusler, on the feasibility of bringing Sierra water across the Washoe Valley up to the Comstock. Could Schusler find a way to engineer a water pipe that could withstand the intense pressure that Buck had referenced in his 1864 letter? Could such a line be designed and prove successful? Schusler was born in Germany in 1842. He had attended Prussian Military Academy in Oldenburg, Germany, and taking a leave from the academy, decided to pursue education in civil engineering in 1862, attending school in Switzerland and Germany. Schusler immigrated to the U.S. in July of 1864 and went to work for the Spring Valley Water Works in San Francisco in the fall of that year, first as an assistant engineer, then being promoted to chief engineer. When Schusler was invited to the Comstock in 1871 to assess the water situation, he was only 29 years old. He walked the Sierra Nevada mountains and visited Marlette Lake and Doll Creek, which would later become Hobart Creek, to determine how and if the water could be brought to the Comstock. In October of 1871, Schusler, now 30, sent his proposed plan to the water company leaders. He believed the creek as the primary feeder could provide an abundant water source. Prior to receiving this letter, though, in July of 1871, the water company trustees, per the company minutes, had agreed to borrow up to $400,000 for the construction of the works to bring the water to Virginia City. So they were already prepared to move forward when Schusler submitted his engineering plan in October. According to Schusler's letter, he proposed that from Doll Creek, a dam could be raised that would create a reservoir of some 30 to 40 million gallons of water. From a distance below the dam, water would enter a wooden flume 4 miles long. The flume would deliver the water to the inlet of an 11-inch diameter iron pipe, double riveted on the long seam and single riveted on the round seam. The pipe would run for just over 6 miles. The heaviest pipe receiving the highest pressure would be made in San Francisco in 23-foot-long lengths. Iron sheets would be delivered to the project site where they'd be rolled, riveted, coated, and laid in a 2-foot by 4-foot deep ditch. The pipe would be connected with lead caulk joints. At the outlet of the pipe, water would enter another wooden flume about 13 miles long that would deliver the water to Virginia City. Schusler estimated that the cost of the pipe laid in the ground would be $100,000. Ultimately, the pipeline would be 7 miles long, with iron wooden elbows and restraining straps for the curved sections. Blow-off valves were placed at low points for the removal of the sediment, and air valves were placed on ridges, at the high ridges, for air to escape when necessary. The pipeline design relied on the principle of an inverted siphon in which gravity causes water to flow from a high elevation inlet to a low elevation and back up to a high elevation outlet. To show this visually, I've included on this slide the profile of the pipeline. I believe that if there is any image that represents the significance of the engineering marvel that was the water company's water system, it is this profile. This diagram was included in an 1885 book by Augustus Bowie Jr. called A Practical Treatise on Hydraulic Mining in California. It is an adaptation of a profile that Schusler drew and included in a December 1873 issue of Mining and Scientific Press about the completed project. It was in this 1873 article that Schusler's design was acknowledged as sustaining, quote, the greatest pressure in the world. At 1,720 feet pressure, or about 750 pounds per square inch, which was almost double the previous known water system pressure, which was at Cherokee Flat in Butte County in California, which was 930 feet pressure, roughly 400 pounds per square inch. And it was a system that Schusler has been the consulting engineer on as well when that system was completed in 1870. The article went on to say that the new water system by Schusler was, quote, an engineering feat of no small magnitude. And in view of the difficulties to overcome it, it will attract the attention of engineers all over the world, unquote. I find Bowie's profile, rather than Schusler's, a bit easier to read as to the numbers, and it also shows the placement of the air and the blow-off valves along the line. You can clearly see the inverted siphon aspect of the line. The inlet of the pipe is at the top left, then the significant drop in elevation, then the continuing up and down of the pipe as it crossed Washoe Valley. It shows the amount of pressure on the pipe at different elevations, as well as the size of the pipe used in various sections. We will come back to this profile in just a little bit. Water company trustees moved forward with Schusler's design to bring water from the Sierra Nevada to the Comstock. While building miles of wooden flumes was a known process, laying a 7-mile-long water pipe across Washoe Valley was an unprecedented effort. Never before had a water pipe been subject to roughly 800 pounds of pressure per square inch, given the nearly 2,000-foot elevation drop from the inlet to the low point in the pipeline. Between May and July 1872, Schusler prepared and signed detailed purchase requisitions for the supplies to complete the system over the complete 21-mile distance. We have copies of those signed requisition orders in our exhibit at the museum. The iron requisition was for 4,301 sheets of iron in 10 different thicknesses, weighing over 476 tons. The rivet requisition was for 952,900 rivets in 16 varying sizes, weighing nearly 41 tons. The lumber requisition was for 918,000 board feet for the flumes. Iron came from Glasgow Iron and Metal Importing Company in Scotland at 5.5 cents per pound, with delivery to San Francisco by February 1873. The contract to manufacture 36,600 feet of iron water pipe, plates, and necessary parts was signed with the Risden Iron and Locomotive Works in San Francisco in January 73 for $57,500 to be completed by April 1873. The pipe would then be brought to Reno, Nevada by the Central Pacific Railroad and then to Lakeview by the Virginia and Truckee Railroad. In March 1873, the water company brought on a new superintendent, J.B. Overton, and the groundwork for what was called the Washoe Ditch Project, or the Washoe Waterworks, began. Both the ditch digging and the flume building likely started in March or early April of 1873, as did the excavation for the Divide Reservoir just south of Virginia City. In May, an advertisement was placed for the teamsters who would deliver more than 500 tons of pipe, which the Virginia and Truckee Railroad began to deliver later that month in May. The first water pipe was laid on June 11th, and the last pipe was laid on July 25th, just 6 weeks later. So who was J.B. Overton, the new superintendent? His name was John Brewster Overton, also known as Captain Overton, and he was originally from New York, born in 1824. Overton appears to have had a difficult childhood, with the death of his mother when he was 9 years old, then being bound out to a farm so he would work, running away from there, then having his father pass away as well. He would work for several years at the New Jersey Railway Company. In late 1849, Overton arrived in San Francisco, by a sailing ship, likely around Cape Horn. In 1860, he was living in Placer County, California, with some 500 acres of land, and he would also enter public service in Plumas County as a member of the Board of Supervisors, then as a postmaster in Onion Valley between 1863 and 1865, then as a county clerk and an auditor between 1866 and 1869. How Overton became connected to the water company is not known, but he was listed in a May 1872 San Francisco newspaper as a trustee of a newly incorporated Gold Hill Gold and Silver Mining Company. When Overton became the superintendent in 1873, he was 48 or 49 years old. We also wanted to try and learn a bit more about the men who were hired to actually complete the work necessary to build the water system. Those that dug the ditches, hauled the lumber, built the flumes, and laid hundreds of tons of iron pipe. Very little was written about the men in newspapers. A few articles noted that the men were living in camps along the route where they were working, enduring such challenges as rattlesnakes and certainly hot weather. Water company payroll records that we found in the collection at the Nevada Historical Society allowed us to learn the names of the men, though, such as Timothy O'Connor and Martin Fitzmaurice, who were paid $3.50 a day, and Thomas Sick, who appears to have been probably a foreman for the working crews. He was paid $5 a day. In our exhibit at the museum, we have included some of these payroll ledgers so the names of the workers can actually be known, along with their pay, as well as their own personal signature when they came to pick up their paychecks. These records show that during the month of July 1873, the workers received daily wages between the $3.50 and $5 that I mentioned, which for that month totaled $6,400, with board at $1,400. Picture here on the slide is a piece of the pipe that these men actually laid. This is on loan to us from the Nevada State Museum, and a piece of the wooden flume on loan from the state of Nevada Marlette water system. After 6 weeks of pipe laying, connections, and testing, on Friday night, August 1st, 1873, the residents of the Comstock celebrated with cannon fire and rockets lighting up the evening sky when water from the Sierra Nevada mountains arrived. Prior to the community celebration, though, on the night of July 30th, after a few days of testing of the line and repairs for leaky joints, one final test was planned. As reported in the newspaper, the water was turned on at the inlet of the pipe, where a beacon fire was set to signal to those miles away that the water had begun to flow. Men were stationed along the line to signal any problems that developed. When the water finally reached the outlet of the pipe, about 3 hours later, a large bonfire was lit to send word back to those at the inlet that the water had arrived. That night, the water only flowed for about an hour. A celebration followed at the Lakeview House, near the lowest point in the pipeline and therefore the highest pressure zone, where Schusler, Overton, and other workmen gathered to celebrate. The Gold Hill Daily News published a lengthy article that celebrated Schusler's engineering achievement as, quote, a marvelous feat. The article noted that the project was, quote, a feat hitherto unattempted by the engineers of the old world or the new, unquote. And that attempt had been successful. I wanted to share a bit about the historic location at Lakeview House, which for many is a visible reminder of the marvelous feat that was accomplished 150, now almost 151 years ago. The house is located about 2 miles northwest of Carson City at the top of Lakeview Hill along Highway 395 or Interstate 580, overlooking the Washoe Valley and Washoe Lake. It was here that the V&T Railroad delivered the first iron pipe in May of 1873 for the new system. And as noted, The inverted siphon pipeline sustained its highest pressure at this point. According to a map at the Nevada State Library and Archive in Carson City, the water line actually went under the house on the northwest corner. In this same corner of the home, inside the dining room, were the pressure gauges for the water company employee or water master to monitor the pressure in the line. In our exhibit at the museum, we have the pressure gauges from inside the residence, which are on loan from the state of Nevada Marlette Water System. The water company was said to have built the Lakeview House in 1873 as an intended residence for Superintendent Overton. We found that the house was actually referenced in newspaper articles a bit earlier, though, when in the summer of 1872, the V&T Railroad had just started laying its route near the Lakeview House, which ended up being just a short distance from the back of the home. In addition to the first water lines being laid near the house, so too would be the second and third lines that were built in 1875 and 1887. Lakeview House, also known as the Water Master's House, was a key monitoring station for the system, with various employees and their families living there over the decades. In our research to learn more about the Lakeview House, we found a 1969 Nevada State Legislature request to study the feasibility of making Lakeview House a visitor center or interpretive center that would share the water system history along with information about the historic V&T Railroad. In a 1971 report that we also found at the Nevada State Library, which was a great find to see that, it gave a full description of what this proposed interpretive center might be. So it was a great find, again, to see. The significance of the Lakeview House was acknowledged in 1978 when it was added to the National Register of Historic Places. Today, the home and property are owned by the state of Nevada and used as a private residence. The picture on the bottom right of the screen is a current photo taken last year of the Lakeview House. After 150 years, Lakeview House remains an admired and respected location in Nevada's rich and remarkable history. The water company's water system, completed in early August 1873, was referenced as an engineering feat, a marvelous feat, and a signal triumph. I can't help but wonder if Schusler, the designing civil engineer, thought the same thing at the time, when he appears to have confidently at age 30 wrote his letter to the water company leadership in October of 71. Imagine Schusler sitting at his desk, writing and mapping out the placement of the line, calculating the amount of pressure each section would encounter depending on its place in the line, and determining what thickness of iron pipe was going to be necessary for the 7-mile-long line. The Bowie map diagram is back on the slide to once again highlight the various components of this engineering feat. Note the pressure along the inverted siphon line, the various thicknesses of the pipe required, the air valves and the blow-off valves. Also pictured here are drawings which were said to have been provided by Schusler in 1873 for that Mining and Scientific Press article we spoke about earlier. From left to right, the first one is the joint that was used between the two pipes, which was filled with lead. The second, the elbow used between two pipes to make a short curve along the line. 3, the design of the blow-off valve. And 4, the design of the air valve. The engineering feat was designed by Schusler and overseen by both he and Overton, and completed by the men who dug the ditches, built the flumes, laid the pipe, coated the pipe inside and out with heated asphaltum and coal tar, joining them with lead joints, and installing the valves. It certainly must have been a stressful, challenging, back-breaking, but amazing project to be a part of. The men had to wonder, would it work when they turned the water on? Imagine the stories these men could have told. And to say that they were part of the team that completed this project in 1873, providing a system to deliver 2 million gallons of water per day to the Comstock at a reported cost between $750,000 and $1 million for the land purchases, all the supplies, and the workforce labor. Now imagine what the Comstock might have been like if Schusler and the leadership of the Virginia and Gold Hill Water Company didn't believe it could be done in the summer and fall of 1871, or were not willing to make the financial investment or the financial gamble, for that matter, on the possibility. What would have happened to the mines and the mills and the continued bonanza without sufficient water? No sooner had the Sierra water arrived on the Comstock in July 73, water company superintendent was already planning to increase the capacity of the water system. In August of 73, the water company began work on a large reservoir roughly 5 miles southwest of Virginia City, which would become known as 5 Mile Reservoir. It was completed in early 1874 and provided a storage capacity of 5 to 7 million gallons of water. The Comstock continued to grow with a mining bonanza and an increase in population, which by 1875 was likely 25,000 residents. With the growth, the long-term goal for the water company was accessing Marlette Lake, located above Hobart Creek. Highlighted on the slide are some of the key aspects of the water system that were added by Superintendent Overton between August of 73 and 1887, when the second and third lines were completed. Our exhibit at the museum provides a much more detailed information on the design and development of these lines. Overton was the designer of these 2 additional lines. They were lap welded seams rather than riveted, and screwed on joints for the number 2 pipe and a converse style joint on the number 3 pipe. The latter joint style we actually have on display at the museum. The second pipe is believed to have been completed by the end of 1875, providing another 2 million gallons of water per day. More flumes were added along with an additional tank at the pipe inlet, which was known as the tank's location, a picture of which is on the right-hand side here on the slide. The estimated cost for the laying of pipe number 2 was $600,000. Today, about 4 miles of the pipe number 2 is still in operation in the water system. It would not be until the summer of 1877 that the water from Marlette Lake actually flowed into the water system. Overton had a nearly 4,000-foot-long tunnel dug through the mountains above Lake Tahoe in order to route the Marlette water to the system, along with raising the existing dam at Marlette Lake in 1876. Information on the rates paid for water is very limited. Elliott Lord's book, Comstock Mining and Miners, did indicate in 1880, mining companies were paying 20 cents per 1,000 gallons, and families were paying about $4 a month for a household of 6 to 8 people. Lord also stated that the water supply being provided to the towns in 1880, about 2/3 of it was being used by the mines and the mills, which accounted for about 2.8 million gallons every 24 hours. The Territorial Enterprise newspaper reported in late July 1887 that Overton had completed the 3rd pipeline. You can see a photo on the bottom right of the screen of hand-drawn lines across Washoe Valley. It shows the 3 lines. The one on the left is pipe number 1, the one in the center is pipe number 3, and the one to the right is pipe number 2. It was also during this time that the Hobart Reservoir was constructed, which had a holding capacity of 35 million gallons. It was reported by the water company that the cost of the original components of the 3 lines was $3 million. As noted at the beginning of my presentation, there is a lot of history regarding the development and operation of the water company and the water system. And we've presented a lot here, but there is a lot more to the story. For the second half, we would, or what some would call the rest of the story, as I say, we invite you to visit the museum to learn more about the company and the continued operation of the water system. You can see here on the slide some of the information that is included in the second half of the exhibit. Information on ice harvesting and some tools from that work. To learn more about the company leadership over the next 70 years, between 1905 and 1974. Pictured here is James M. Leonard, who started as a bookkeeper for the water company in 1901 under Superintendent Overton, and then became the superintendent in 1905 after Overton retired. We have on exhibit the letter that Leonard wrote to the water company leadership, expressing his interest in becoming the superintendent. Leonard's son, Hobart Leonard, would become superintendent after his father's death in 1959 and lead the company until 1974 when the local distribution side of the system was sold to Story County. There is information on the water system stations and the life of the caretakers at Marlette Lake, Red House, and Lakeview House. You'll learn about the mayor of Marlette Lake, the unfortunate Hobart Dam break in 1911, and also see the Dodds water motor from the Lakeview House, which is a Pelton-style water wheel that generated electricity for the residents. We also share information on the water company operations, which were conducted from the water company building at 48 South B Street in Virginia City. On exhibit is Superintendent Overton's desk, along with other office equipment. It is here at the building, which is a private residence today, that the marvelous feat of the water system was acknowledged in 1975 with a plaque by the American Society of Civil Engineers as a National Historic Civil Engineering Landmark, along with recognition in 1976 by the American Water Works Association. And while there is no plaque, but there certainly should be one in my opinion, in 1992, the Marlette Lake water system was added to the National Register of Historic Places as well. We also have information on the changing water system ownership in various stages, the operation of the water system today, which is really fascinating to see how everything has now run through technology and the upgrades that they continue to make. And then some information on the restoration of the Red House complex by the Nevada State Parks. So again, we invite you to the museum to enjoy the exhibit and learn more. I thank you for your time. I hope you have learned some new information, and my contact information is here if you would like to get in touch with me. So thank you very much.
Oh, that was great, Sherry. It is an amazing project and just so complex. So I knew you spent quite a bit of time down here at the Historical Society going.
We did. You guys were great, as was the staff at the State Archive. Couple visits now and then, yes.
All right, so I've got some questions here for you. Let's see. Oh, did you say that the Doll Creek was renamed Hobart Creek? Do you know when that happened? Right. And then the other part of the question is, does this water flow from Marlette Lake?
Yes, it does. Up the latter part. Yes, it does now. So I don't know the exact date of when the name changed. I don't think it was too long after that initial 1871. I want to say within the next couple years, if that. So.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, another question we have here. Did you find any reports or letters written by Schusler himself? And were the letters written in German or English?
Well, the water records at the State Archive in Carson City had a lot of items that were done by Schusler. I don't recall the one letter, the proposal letter, the October 1871 letter is handwritten and it's in English. And it's very to the point, very easy to read. So I think he had a very good command of the English language. But I mentioned the requisition for the supplies. Those are all in his hand and signed by Schusler. There are also maps there at the State Archive that are hand-drawn maps by Schusler. So he was very hands-on. And those were some of those, great finds, I called them. When you'd open up a folder and you see that this was Schusler who did this. So yes, so those are there, but I did not see anything in German.
Okay. Let's see. Another one is the American Washoe was helping the Scottish economy with the Order of Iron. Was the iron formed into pipes in San Francisco? I think you mentioned
Yes.
sheets, or did they make them into the pipes themselves?
Yeah, the Scottish company, they made those into sheets, and then those were shipped to San Francisco. And then the Risden Iron and Locomotive Works were actually manufacturing the pipes. That contract, again, written by Schusler, is in the collection at the State Archive. And again, very succinct, easy to read. For somebody who's a civil engineer and who does this, I would imagine there are aspects in those records that are just, fascinating for them to see because they know that inner workings of what's there. But he is so detailed in his paperwork, and he basically wrote out exactly how Risden was supposed to manufacture those pipes.
Wow. Okay. Did this supply some water to Carson was another question.
It does. In the exhibit, like I said, we reached out to all the entities that use the water. So some of that water is being provided to Carson City. It's not a great deal. Hopefully it'll be more in the future. I know they're making some planned improvements in Carson City at the Quill treatment plant. So I think once that is upgraded, they'll be able to use more of the water from that. So yeah, but no, Carson City does use some water from there.
Okay. There's a question, I think I can answer that. Is Virginia City considered part of the Nevada State Park System? No, they're part of the Comstock Historic District that is managed. So any repairs or modifications to any of the structures is managed because it's a historic district. But the park connection with the water system, what was that part? Maybe that's where the question was.
Yeah. So, because, the Marlette, Hobart Creek, Hobart Reservoir up there, that's part of the state parks, the Lake Tahoe State Park. And you can, if you just easy enough to Google, they have a written history about the park and the water system on there, and actually go into a little more detail about the at Spooner Summit there and the removal of the trees in order to support the mines. But you can look at that online and find that. So it's a nice history with some different photographs and whatnot. But yeah, that's the Lake Tahoe State Park.
Okay. There is another question. On the picture that has 3 hand-drawn lines of pipes, number 1, 2, and 3, is Geiger grade just to the left of pipe 1? And are these pipes still there?
Let me back up here and let's see if I don't think. No, these are coming. Yeah, Geiger grade's going to be in front of this picture. So these are coming down from the Sierra Nevadas down to that Lakeview house area there at 395, and then coming across Washoe Valley to the Comstock. So Geiger's going to be nowhere in this picture. It'll be in front of it.
Okay.
North side.
Okay. And then another one, wasn't the Red House part of the water system? And isn't that part of Marlette, correct?
Correct. It sits off right next to the Hobart Creek Reservoir is just above Red House.
And
The
wasn't
creek
that where
runs,
the people lived?
yes,
Okay.
yes. I mentioned the other part that's in the exhibit is the dam break that occurred at Hobart Reservoir in 1911. And the Red House complex was just below that. And so when that dam broke, unfortunately, it wiped out the Red House complex.
Yeah.
And at that time, it was during early morning hours when that happened. The caretaker, his wife, and another wife of another caretaker from one of the
That's
other
it. It was the
stations
wives. Yeah.
were sleeping at the Red House. The caretaker, he survived, but unfortunately, both of the wives were killed in that dam break at Red House. And so we have information on those two ladies in our exhibit to memorialize them. But yeah, it was there at that Red House complex. But the Nevada State Parks restored that complex. So if you're hiking in that area, you can see that. They're not open, but you can see the buildings and whatnot there. So a neat project for them to have done that.
Yeah, and I was gonna say it was Pete DeBay and a few people that actually came to the Historic Society, and so they were looking through a lot of our collection as they were going different places, trying to figure out the right colors and trying to find paperwork for that.
Yeah.
So I remember that.
Yeah, it was fairly quickly rebuilt because they had to continue to have the caretakers there to monitor the system of what was going on. But yeah, so people can take a look at that and see that. And it's actually Red House and Lakeview are the two remaining structures of the water system of those station houses.
Okay. So on the slide itself, it said that some of the valves are in the house, or so is that like in the basement or outside? Or I just was curious.
Yeah,
I don't know if I knew
they
that.
were actually pressure gauges, so not valves. So we have these on display at the museum, but these showed the pressure that was running through that line, and it was the very northwest corner underneath the house where the line went. So the pressure gauges were attached to that. They went down into the basement cellar area, but they were apparently right there in the dining room. So imagine having your meal and keeping an eye on those pressure gauges, hoping everything's okay. But yeah, that was the immediate way for that caretaker to see if they were too low or too high. Something was wrong. But yeah, that's
you
what
didn't
those
have to
were.
walk down into the basement then. So
yeah, it's like you could get on. And I didn't mention this, but we have it again in the exhibit. There was a telephone system installed along the line by the water company, so that the caretakers had a way to communicate to each other and whatnot. And we were talking about Red House. When the dam broke, the water stopped flowing through the flumes. And that's what caught the attention of the caretakers there at the tanks area, that there was a problem. So they were able to call and there was no answer. And they knew something was wrong, not only because there was no water running, but nobody was answering the phones either. So they had a way to, if something was wrong on those gauges or something wrong in the line, they were able to get in touch with the other station to try and find out what was going on.
So there's another comment here. Didn't Red House produce electricity? I don't know.
That I don't know. I did mention with Lakeview House, the Dodge water motor that we have on display, that did create electricity for the Lakeview House. I don't recall anything specific for Red House, but we do, the water system, the state did loan us that Dodge water motor, which is a Pelton wheel style motor. So we have that on display. So you can see how that worked and how that would generate electricity there at the Lakeview House.
Okay. Um, there is another question. Where is the 5 Mile Reservoir located?
Yeah, so it's I guess that would be northeast of, is it north? Yeah, northeast of Virginia City. There's a
Okay.
picture, oh yeah, here on the screen that you can see it. You can Google it on a Google map. You can pull
Oh, okay.
circle five, look from 5 Mile Reservoir, and it is pinned on the Google map, so you can see that. But it's
Okay.
up in the mountains there. You can't see it from Virginia City, but it's up in the hills there.
Nice. Nice. I really liked you talking, and that was a question I was going to ask anyway, and then you answered it during your presentation, but about knowing several of the people's names, the workers that was working on the line. So I thought that was pretty neat, and that you were able to see their signatures.
Yeah, and thankfully to what you guys have in your collection there, that we found that there's anybody, like I say, there's a lot of different avenues that you can go down for research and filling in more of the pieces to the story. And those payroll records and the financial records that you have in your collection there, I think would be a great research project for somebody to really look at that. But it was
Yeah.
great to find those payroll records and to actually know who these men were, because you just don't see that in the newspaper articles at the time. And there were so many of them working on it. Yeah, it was really rewarding for me to know that that information still survived,
Absolutely.
that we could share that.
Neil, you had a question?
Well, I just wanted to thank her for sure. A huge amount of research, and I have this ultimate respect for researchers. You know that because I put you to work helping me. But I wanted to thank Sherry. That was a wonderful program. You covered a lot of bases. We look forward to the next chapter. And
Certainly.
a sincere thank you. We look forward to seeing you at God Club in June. We will look forward to that. And I'm going to sign off and let Sherry in the library also thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Neil. Thank you, Sherry.
You're so welcome. There is one more question.
Oh, sure.
Do you know how deep the ditches were as they dug across Washoe Valley? Was
My
there
understanding
information?
yeah, they were 2 feet by 4 feet, 2 feet wide, 4 feet deep.
Okay. That's pretty impressive. Well, Sherry, this was just amazing. And one more thing. Do you want to mention, I know you were working on this for a while, but how long did it take you to research for the exhibit? And then, of course, getting ready for this presentation. I know it wasn't something overnight because it's a lot of information to
Yeah,
get correct.
yeah. I'd say I probably started 2023. So our exhibit opened the end of April of 23. So I started doing the research with our collection first and doing the reading and what in January. So I'm maybe 60, 70 hours of research and whatnot. It's hard, sometimes I think people who do research, you find yourself going down an avenue and it's 2 hours later and you're like, well, wait a minute, where did I start? Why, where was I going with this? So I'm trimming down the time because certain things would be of more interest to me and I'd spend a lot more time looking at something just to better understand it. But it was an opportunity. We were so appreciative that Jim Leonard had just sent a quick email to remind us about this anniversary and how important it was. And because with everything else we were doing, it wasn't on our radar. So we're so thankful that he reminded us that was coming up in doing that. And we look forward to sharing this the rest of the year. And we're also looking at doing a digital version that will be on YouTube, kind of an animated version that would be appropriate for students to learn about the system as well. So, yeah. So we have a few more things planned.
That's amazing. And because if anybody hasn't seen their website, I really like your school tour for the kids on your website, so they should definitely check it out. And it's
Right.
just amazing building, but also just a wonderful museum. So it's
Thank
I
you.
really appreciate all the work that's been done for it.
Yeah, great. Well, we're getting ready to open. Those early hours start on April 5th, so we look forward to seeing more people there this year.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sherry. We really
You're
appreciate
welcome.
it. And thank you everybody for attending. And I will send, as always, I just want to thank the Washoe County Library System for helping us out and put these great programs available. And I'll send it back to Samantha.
Yes, wonderful presentation. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Sherry Hazorn, Neil Cobb, and Sherry Griffin Grundy with the Nevada Historical Society, and John, our Washoe County Library tech hand, for making this event possible today. So thank you very much, and you all have a nice day. Bye now.
Bye.
Bye-bye.